I wasn't supposed to meet Lily Bennett. In fact, if I had arrived at the airport 5 minutes earlier, I never would have seen her. My name is Evan Parker. I was 31 years old, flying from Seattle to Boston for what should have been the most ordinary business trip of my life. Instead, it became the day that changed everything. I reached the gate just in time to watch the airplane pull away from the terminal. The boarding door closed less than 30 seconds before I got there. I stood there breathing hard, my suitcase beside me, convinced someone would stop the aircraft. Nobody did. The gate agent looked at me with the kind of sympathy reserved for people who had just made an expensive mistake. "I'm sorry, sir. The gate is closed." I was right there. "I know. I can literally still see the plane." "I know." She typed something into her computer. "The next available flight leaves in a little over 5 hours. 5 hours. I closed my eyes. One missed alarm. One traffic jam. One security line that moved slower than human evolution. 5 hours. I let out a slow breath. "Perfect. I'll get you rebooked." "Thank you." 10 minutes later, I found myself sitting near another departure gate with an overpriced airport coffee, a bruised ego, and absolutely nowhere to be. The terminal buzzed with rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, crying toddlers, and people pretending airport chairs were comfortable. I checked my watch for the 5th time in 3 minutes. Then someone sat down beside me, not across from me, not 2 seats away, right beside me. I barely looked up, until I heard a quiet laugh. "You missed yours too?" I turned. She was holding a paper cup in one hand and a boarding pass in the other. Dark brown hair, warm hazel eyes, a tired smile that somehow still managed to brighten her whole face. She looked at me for exactly 2 seconds, then glanced toward the runway. I've never seen someone look so personally offended by an airplane. Despite everything, I laughed. "I think it left just to upset me." She smiled. I had the exact same thought about mine. For reasons I couldn't explain, that single sentence made the airport feel a little less lonely. She held out her hand. "I'm Lily. Evan." She shook it once. Her hand was cool from the iced coffee she was holding. "Nice to meet you under unfortunate circumstances. I've had worse introductions." "Oh." She leaned back in her chair. "Let's hear it." "When I was 24, I spilled an entire cup of coffee on my future boss during a job interview." Her eyebrows shot up. "You still got the job?" "I did." "How?" He laughed. "You were lucky. I've been told." She smiled. "I once walked into the wrong airport lounge." "That doesn't sound too bad." "It was first class." I laughed. "And I sat there for almost 15 minutes. Had coffee. A croissant. I even complimented the furniture." "What happened?" "A very polite employee asked if I'd like him to escort me." She paused dramatically. "Back to reality." I laughed harder than I expected. She joined in. For a few seconds, we were just 2 strangers laughing in the middle of Terminal C. Felt strangely easy. "So," Lily looked at my boarding pass. "Boston." "Yeah. You too." She nodded. "My connection to Boston got delayed. So technically, we're both victims. I prefer survivors." "I like that better." An announcement echoed through the terminal. Another delayed flight. Another wave of disappointed groans spread through the waiting area. Lily sighed. "I guess we're going to be here for a while." "Looks that way." She looked around. "I don't think I can spend 5 hours staring at departure boards." I was considering making friends with the vending machine. It seems emotionally unavailable. "I noticed." She laughed, then pointed across the terminal. "Bookstore." I followed her gaze. A small airport bookstore stood near the corner, almost hidden behind a coffee stand. I haven't walked through one of those in years. "Perfect." "Why?" "Because people who say that always end up buying something. I feel judged. I've only known you 4 minutes. And I'm surprisingly confident." I shook my head. "You make decisions quickly. My patients appreciate that." I looked at her. "Patience." She hesitated for the first time, then smiled. I'm a pediatric cardiologist. That surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. What were you expecting? I don't know. Travel blogger? She laughed. I'd make a terrible influencer. Why? I forget to take pictures. I actually experience places. I think that's illegal now. It probably is. We stood up almost at the same time. She adjusted the strap of her bag. Come on. If we're both trapped in this airport, we might as well make the most of it. For reasons I couldn't explain, I followed her without thinking. And somehow, missing my flight was already starting to feel a little less like bad luck. The bookstore was smaller than it looked from across the terminal. Half the shelves were filled with best-selling thrillers. The other half sold travel guides, overpriced headphones, and enough bottled water to survive an apocalypse. Lily stopped in front of a display of novels. You judge people by what they read? Constantly. That's dangerous. It is. She picked up a mystery novel. This one screams. I want to seem mysterious. I grabbed a science fiction book. And this. She tilted her head. Engineer. I blinked. How did you know I'm an engineer? She pointed at the cover. You didn't choose the story. You immediately read the description on the back. You checked who wrote it. Then you compared editions. I've been watching you for exactly 14 seconds. I laughed. You're observant. I have to be. What kind of engineer? Software. She nodded as if that confirmed something. I knew it. What gave it away? You organize books before buying them. I do not. You absolutely do. I looked down. The books in my hands were perfectly aligned. I hate that you noticed. She smiled triumphantly. I notice things. Occupational hazard? Exactly. I picked up another novel. Your turn. What about me? I've known you less than 20 minutes. Tell me something. She pretended to think. I'm left-handed. I already knew that. Her eyebrows lifted. You watched me hold my coffee. She laughed. Okay. That was impressive. My turn again. She crossed her arms. Dangerous. You don't sleep enough. Her smile faded just a little. What makes you think that? The shadows under your eyes. You yawn every few minutes. And, I hesitated. You smile like someone who's trying very hard to make sure nobody notices she's tired. For the first time since we'd met, she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at me for several seconds. That's surprisingly accurate. I wasn't trying to be. I know. She slowly put the novel back on the shelf. I've been working a lot. Hospital. She nodded. Long shifts. Too many. I almost missed my flight because I fell asleep in the airport lounge. I thought you said your connection was delayed. It was. I still almost slept through it. I smiled. So we're both here because we have terrible timing. Apparently. She started walking again. We wandered through the rest of the bookstore without saying much. Oddly, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Felt easy. Like we'd skipped the awkward part strangers usually have. Near the register, she stopped in front of a rack of postcards. One caught her attention. It showed the Boston skyline at sunrise. She smiled softly. I used to collect these. Postcards. My dad and I. Every bit of humor disappeared from her voice. We'd send one to each other every time one of us traveled. She turned the card over in her hands. I still buy one sometimes, but I usually forget to mail it. Something about the way she said it made me think the postcard wasn't really what she was thinking about. I didn't push. Instead, I picked up a postcard beside hers. Seattle at sunset. I guess I have to buy one now. She looked at me. You don't collect them. I didn't. I smiled. But it seems like today is already full of unexpected decisions. She laughed quietly. I like that answer. As we walked toward the register, an announcement echoed through the terminal. Attention passengers traveling to Boston. We both looked up at exactly the same time. For one hopeful second, I thought they were finally calling our flight. Instead, the announcement ended with words neither of us wanted to hear. Due to weather conditions, Departure has been delayed an additional 2 hours. Lily slowly closed her eyes. You've got to be kidding me. I looked at the departure board. 7 hours. We now had 7 hours to wait. I turned back toward her. Well, I guess we're buying the books after all. For the first time that morning, she reached over, lightly bumped her shoulder against mine, and smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Lily paid for her postcard. I bought the science fiction novel I knew I probably wouldn't finish. When we stepped back into the terminal, the airport somehow felt even busier than before. Families hurried past with oversized backpacks. Business travelers argued into Bluetooth headsets. A little girl ran after a balloon while her exhausted father chased both of them. Lily watched the scene with a small smile. Airports are strange. How so? They're full of people saying hello and goodbye. At exactly the same time, I looked around. She wasn't wrong. A young couple stood wrapped around each other near one gate. Across from them, an older man wiped his eyes before hugging someone one last time. It's like every emotion exists in one building, I said. She nodded. Exactly. Her stomach growled. She froze. I looked at her. Was that? It wasn't. It absolutely was. She sighed dramatically. I haven't eaten since 6 this morning. I checked my watch. It was almost 2 in the afternoon. Lucky for me, embarrassment burns calories. I don't think that's medically accurate. I'm choosing to believe it. I pointed toward a restaurant overlooking the runway. Lunch? She hesitated. I couldn't let you. You already bought the postcard. That was $4. I'm still emotionally recovering. She laughed. Fine. But I'm buying coffee later. Deal. The restaurant overlooked the airport's largest runway. Planes taxied slowly beneath a gray afternoon sky. We found a table beside the window. Neither of us looked at the menu for long. I'll have the burger, I said. Lily smiled. I knew you would. You did. You have burger energy. What does that even mean? I don't know. It just feels correct. And you? She closed the menu. Tomato soup. A salad. I stared at her. That's lunch. I eat like a grandmother. I was going to say rabbit. My grandmother would have been offended. When the waitress left, the conversation became quieter, more personal. So, Lily rested her elbows lightly on the table. What takes you to Boston? Work. My company is meeting a software firm there. She nodded. Exciting. Necessary. You don't sound convinced. I'm not. What would you rather be doing? Nobody had asked me that in a long time. I thought about it. I used to photograph landscapes. Her eyes lit up. Really? Just as a hobby. I'd disappear every weekend. Mountains. Lakes. Forests. So why did you stop? I shrugged. Life. Work. Deadlines. I kept telling myself I'd start again next month. And then, 3 years disappeared. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's sad. I know. What about you? You wanted to be a doctor forever? She smiled. No. I wanted to be a veterinarian. What changed? When I was 12, my little cousin was born with a heart condition. She looked out the window. I spent a lot of time in children's hospitals. I watched one doctor completely change my aunt's life. She smiled softly. I remember thinking, I want to make someone feel that relieved one day. The food arrived. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I noticed she hadn't touched her soup. You okay? She blinked. Sorry. I was somewhere else. You don't have to talk about it. She gave me a grateful smile. Thank you. Not, thank you for changing the subject. Not, thank you for understanding. Just, thank you. Sometimes that single sentence carried more meaning than anything else. Outside, a plane lifted into the cloudy afternoon sky. For a second, both of us watched it in silence. Then Lily quietly said, I wonder if missing our flights was actually bad luck. I turned toward her. What if it wasn't? She looked at me. Neither of us smiled this time, because for the first time since we'd met, the question didn't sound like a joke. For a while, neither of us said anything. The airport restaurant faded into the background. Forks clinked against plates. Announcements echoed through the terminal. A little boy laughed somewhere behind us. Life kept moving, but our conversation had slowed into something quieter, something more honest. Lily looked out at the runway. My dad used to love airports. I turned toward her. He wasn't afraid of flying? She smiled softly. He loved everything about traveling. He said airports were one of the few places where hope was visible. What did he mean? She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. Everyone is going somewhere. Starting something. Coming home. She laughed quietly. He believed every departure board was full of possibilities. I smiled. He sounds like an optimist. He was. Were. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Lily's smile faded. She looked back toward the runway. My dad has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The sentence landed between us like something heavy. I didn't speak. I didn't tell her I was sorry. I didn't tell her everything would be okay. Because sometimes, those words aren't honest. She noticed my silence. Most people start apologizing immediately. I know. You didn't. I didn't think you needed another person saying something they can't promise. She looked at me for several long seconds. Then she nodded. Thank you. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I found out 6 weeks ago. I've barely been home since. The hospital gave him a little more time than they expected. But, she swallowed. My mom called this morning. He asked if I'd come. Her eyes stayed on the window. He didn't say goodbye. He just said. She smiled sadly. Don't rush. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She wiped it away immediately. He still worries about making everyone else's life easier. I reached across the table, not to grab her hand. I turned my palm upward, leaving the choice entirely to her. She looked at it, then quietly placed her hand in mine. Her fingers were colder now. I almost missed my connection because I fell asleep. She laughed once. I kept thinking, what kind of daughter sleeps through the flight she promised she'd take? I gently shook my head. The kind who's exhausted. The kind who's been carrying too much. She looked at me. You make everything sound simple. It isn't. No, it isn't. Outside, another aircraft rolled slowly toward the runway. Passengers inside probably had no idea 2 strangers were sitting 30 feet away, sharing the hardest conversation either of them had expected to have that day. Lily squeezed my hand once. You know something strange? What? I've told friends. My coworkers. My aunt. My brother. She smiled through tired eyes. But somehow, this is the easiest conversation I've had. I frowned slightly. We've only known each other for a few hours. I know. Doesn't that seem ridiculous? A little. She smiled. Maybe. Or maybe. It's easier to tell the truth to someone who met you before you started pretending you were okay. Those words stayed with me, because I realized she was right. The Lily I'd met this morning wasn't pretending to be the strongest person in every room. She was simply Lily. An announcement echoed through the restaurant. Attention passengers traveling to Boston. Both of us instinctively looked up. Flight 482 is now expected to begin boarding in approximately 30 minutes. Lily let out a slow breath. I guess. This is really happening. I nodded. Looks like we're finally going to Boston. She looked back at me. A tiny smile appeared. I'm glad I missed my first flight. I smiled. So am I. Neither of us realized it yet. But that delayed airplane had already changed both of our lives. Neither of us rushed to stand. 30 more minutes. That was all the airport had given us. Strange how quickly a few hours could begin to matter. Lily looked down at our empty plates. I should probably call my mom. Go ahead. You don't mind. Not at all. She smiled gratefully. I'll only be a minute. She stepped away toward the large windows overlooking the runway. I stayed at the table, not because I wanted to overhear, because I wanted to give her the privacy she deserved. I watched another aircraft taxi toward the runway. People hurried through the terminal carrying backpacks, flowers, balloons. Everyone seemed to be on their way somewhere important. 10 minutes later, Lily returned. Her eyes were slightly red, but she was smiling. "Everything okay?" She nodded slowly. "My dad's awake. He keeps asking if I've landed." "You haven't told him about the delay?" She shook her head. "He worries enough. I don't want him spending the afternoon watching the clock." I understood that, more than she probably realized. My mom put him on speaker for a minute. She smiled softly. "He asked if I'd eaten." I laughed quietly. Parents never stop doing that. "No, they really don't." She looked down at the postcard sticking out of her bag. "He also reminded me to buy a postcard." I smiled. Some traditions survive everything. They do. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed. My manager. "Where are you?" "Client dinner starts at 7:30. I stared at the message. Lily noticed. "Business trip." "Unfortunately." She smiled. "You don't sound excited." "I'm really not." "What do you actually enjoy?" I thought for a second. "Taking pictures." "You weren't joking earlier." "No. My apartment is full of cameras." "What do you photograph?" "Places. People. Moments that disappear too quickly." She looked at me carefully. "That's a very specific answer. It took me years to figure it out." She rested her chin lightly on her hand. "I think you'd photograph airports." I smiled. "I probably would. They're full of disappearing moments." Her words lingered between us. Then she looked around the terminal. "You know, if we'd caught our flights, we would have walked past each other without even noticing. Probably. You would have spent 5 hours in Boston meetings. And you would have been at the hospital." She nodded. "Our lives would have stayed exactly the same." I looked at her. "I'm not sure mine would have." She held my gaze for just a second longer than before. Then, an announcement interrupted us. "Passengers traveling on Flight 482 to Boston may now proceed to Gate C-17. Lily looked toward the departure board. "That's us." Finally, we both stood. Neither of us seemed to move very quickly, almost as if boarding the plane meant admitting the strange little chapter inside the airport was coming to an end. We walked toward Gate C-17 together, side by side, without thinking about it. The boarding line had already formed. Families, business travelers, college students, people checking passports every 30 seconds even though they hadn't moved. Lily laughed quietly. "I love how everyone suddenly forgets assigned boarding groups. It's human nature. It's airport panic." She smiled. "I'll trust your scientific explanation." When the gate agent scanned my boarding pass, she looked at her screen, then at Lily, then back at me. "You two have been reseated." I frowned. "Reseated?" The earlier delay caused some changes. She typed for a second, then smiled. "You're together now." She handed us both our new boarding passes. Lily looked down. 22A. I checked mine. 22B. She slowly looked up at me. A small smile appeared. "I guess the airport isn't finished with us yet." For reasons I couldn't explain, neither was I. Lily stopped just before the entrance to the jet bridge. She looked down at our boarding passes one more time. 22A and B. "What are the odds?" "I think the airport finally feels guilty." "I'll accept that explanation." She smiled. "So will I." We stepped onto the plane together. The familiar scent of coffee, recycled air, and someone's expensive perfume filled the cabin. Passengers were already lifting oversized carry-ons into bins that were obviously too small. Lily looked up. "I swear suitcases get heavier once they're inside airplanes. It's a scientific phenomenon." "I knew you'd have data." "I don't. But it sounds convincing." She laughed. The woman sitting across the aisle smiled at us. "You two are adorable." Both of us answered at exactly the same time. We're not. Our eyes met. The older woman grinned. I've been married 43 years. I know that look. Neither of us argued. Mostly because neither of us knew what that look actually was. We found row 22. Lily took the window. I slid into the middle seat beside her. As I fastened my seatbelt, she looked out at the rain-speckled window. I always take the window seat. Why? So I have something to look at when I overthink. Does it help? Not really. I just like pretending it does. The last passengers boarded. Flight attendants demonstrated the safety instructions with impressive enthusiasm despite nobody watching. Lily leaned slightly toward me. Can I tell you something embarrassing? I feel like that's becoming our thing. She smiled. I hate takeoffs. I looked at her. You don't like flying? I love flying. I hate the first 60 seconds. Why? She shrugged. I don't know. I lose control. I don't like not being able to do anything. I spend my entire job fixing problems. During takeoff, there's nothing to fix. I nodded. That actually makes sense. She looked surprised. You don't think it's irrational? I think everyone has something. She smiled. What about you? I looked toward the runway. I hate saying goodbye. Her expression softened. Even short ones. I always feel like I forgot to say something important. Before she could answer, the captain's voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 482 to Boston. Outside, the engines slowly came alive. The plane began moving. Lily took a slow breath. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, but I noticed her fingers tightening together. Without thinking, I turned my hand over on the armrest. Not touching hers, just leaving it there. An option. She looked down, then back at me. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Making it my choice. I smiled. It usually works better. For a second, she simply looked at my hand. Then, very gently, she slipped her fingers between mine. Just until we're in the air, she whispered. Of course. The plane turned onto the runway. The engines roared. Lily closed her eyes for just a moment. I felt her grip tighten. Then, the aircraft surged forward. Faster, faster, until suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath us. Chicago grew smaller below the clouds. A few seconds later, the seatbelt sign remained on, but the hardest part was over. Lily slowly opened her eyes. She let out a quiet breath. We made it. We did. She looked down, only then realizing she was still holding my hand. For a brief second, she looked embarrassed. I gently squeezed her fingers once. You can keep holding it. If you want. She looked at me, then smiled. I think I will. And for the rest of the climb, neither of us let go. About 20 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign finally switched off. Passengers immediately stood as if they had been waiting their entire lives to reach the overhead bins. Lily laughed. Humans are fascinating. They've been sitting for 20 minutes. And suddenly everyone urgently needs something. I think it's instinct. Airport instinct? Exactly. She finally let go of my hand. Slowly. Neither of us mentioned it. A flight attendant rolled a drink cart down the aisle. What can I get you? She asked. Black coffee, I said. Lily looked at me. You're really doing that after airport coffee? I've accepted my fate. She smiled. I'll have hot tea. A few minutes later, she wrapped both hands around the paper cup. You know, I've had hundreds of conversations on airplanes. Really? I travel a lot for work. And I usually spend the whole flight pretending to sleep. I laughed. That's honest. It works. So why are you talking to me? She looked at me over the rim of her cup. I've been asking myself the same question. And I don't know yet. She smiled. But I'm glad I am. The clouds stretched endlessly outside the window. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Felt quieter now. Almost peaceful. Lily rested her head against the seat. Can I ask you something? Anything. When was your last relationship? I wasn't expecting that. About 2 years ago. What happened? I smiled faintly. We wanted different futures. That's the polite version. It is. She laughed. What's the honest version? We stopped choosing each other. Her smile faded. That sounds painful. It was. We kept hoping things would somehow fix themselves. They didn't. She nodded slowly. I've seen that. You? She looked down at her tea. I was engaged. The words caught me off guard. What? 3 years ago. I stayed quiet. He was a surgeon. We practically lived at the hospital. What happened? She smiled, but there wasn't much happiness in it. We became co-workers, instead of partners. I kept thinking things would get better after the next rotation, the next vacation, the next holiday. They never did. So, we ended it. You've never been married? She shook her head. No. Sometimes I wonder if we were in love, or just too busy to notice we weren't anymore. I looked at her. I think you already know the answer. She smiled sadly. I probably do. Silence settled between us again. Not awkward. Comfortable. Outside, the late afternoon sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light flooded the cabin. Lily looked out the window. It's beautiful. I followed her gaze. The clouds looked like an endless white ocean. You know what I would have done 2 years ago? What? I would have taken a picture. What stopped you? I thought for a second. I forgot. She looked at me. No. You convinced yourself there'd always be another chance. Her words landed harder than I expected. Because they were true. She smiled softly. Take one. What? The picture. I looked at her. I don't have my camera. She pointed toward my phone. You don't always need the perfect lens. I slowly pulled out my phone, raised it toward the window, clicked once, then lowered it again. She smiled. Better. What? You remembered. I looked at the photo. It wasn't perfect, but somehow, I knew I'd never delete it. A few minutes later, Lily's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Her smile disappeared. My mom. I nodded. You should answer. She hesitated. I'm afraid. I looked at her quietly. Sometimes, the call you're afraid to answer is the one you'll regret missing. She stared at the phone for another second, then pressed accept. Hi, Mom. I turned toward the window, giving her the privacy she'd given me earlier. I watched the clouds, pretending not to hear, until one sentence made my heart sink. Lily's voice became very small. He's asking if I'm close. Lily listened without saying much. I kept my eyes on the clouds outside the window, not because I wasn't curious, because some conversations deserved privacy. A few moments later, I heard her laugh softly. Then, I heard her crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that it caught in the middle of a sentence. I'll be there soon. I promise. She ended the call. For a few seconds, she simply stared at the dark screen in her hand. I didn't ask. Eventually, she looked over at me. My mom said he keeps asking what time my flight lands. She smiled sadly. He still thinks I have plenty of time. I nodded quietly. Maybe he just wants something to look forward to. She looked down. I hope so. The flight attendant walked past, collecting empty cups. Neither of us noticed until she stopped beside us. Can I take these? Oh, Lily blinked. Yes. Sorry. The woman smiled kindly. No need to apologize. After she walked away, Lily rested her head against the window. You know what scares me the most? What? I'm a doctor. I spend my life telling families not to lose hope. I explain treatments. I answer impossible questions. I tell parents we'll do everything we can. She swallowed. But when it's your own family, her voice became quieter. Suddenly you don't know anything. I looked at her. You don't have to. She frowned slightly. What? You don't have to know how this ends. You just have to be there. Her eyes met mine. You always say the simple thing. I don't think it's simple. No, she smiled. I guess it isn't. A few minutes passed. The cabin lights dimmed even further. Many passengers had fallen asleep. Some watched movies. Others stared silently through the windows. Lily suddenly laughed. I looked at her. What? I just realized something. What? I've told you more about my life today than I've told some friends in years. I noticed. Does that seem strange to you? A little. She smiled. I don't even know your favorite color. Blue. That was easy. What about yours? She looked toward the sunset outside. Green. I never know why. It just feels peaceful. I would have guessed yellow. She laughed. Why? You're the kind of person who brightens a room. She looked at me, completely speechless. I immediately realized what I'd said. That sounded smoother in my head. She didn't laugh. Instead, a slow smile spread across her face. No, it sounded exactly right. For a second, neither of us looked away. Then the captain's voice interrupted us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into Boston in approximately 25 minutes. Lily let out a quiet breath. I wish this flight were longer. The words came out so softly, I wasn't sure she'd meant to say them aloud. I smiled. So do I. She looked at me. Really? I've spent the best part of today talking to someone I wasn't even supposed to meet. She shook her head, smiling. It's funny. What is? This morning I thought missing my flight was the worst thing that could happen. And now, she looked out at the clouds one last time. Now I think it might have been the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me. Neither of us knew what would happen after we landed. Whether we'd ever see each other again. Whether this was simply one extraordinary day, or the beginning of something much bigger. But as the plane slowly descended through the evening clouds, for the first time in a very long time, neither of us was afraid of what came next. The wheels touched the runway with a gentle bump. A few passengers applauded. Someone behind us immediately unfastened their seatbelt despite the sign still being on. Lily smiled. Some traditions never change. I was just thinking that. The plane taxied toward the terminal. Neither of us reached for our phones. Neither of us seemed eager to break whatever this day had become. When the seatbelt sign finally chimed, people stood all at once. Overhead bins slammed open. Suitcases appeared from impossible places. Lily laughed quietly. I think everyone's trying to win an invisible race. The prize is standing in the jet bridge for 10 minutes. Exactly. I reached up and pulled down her carry-on before grabbing mine. She looked at me. You keep doing that. What? Helping me before I ask. I smiled. I'm trying not to make a habit of it. I'm not. We stepped into the terminal together. Boston greeted us with the familiar noise of rolling suitcases and overlapping announcements. For a moment, neither of us moved. The airport that had brought us together was now asking us to go in different directions. My mom's waiting outside, Lily said quietly. I figured. And your client? They've probably assumed I'm already here. She smiled. You should probably go. I should. Neither of us did. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out the Boston postcard she'd bought hours earlier. She turned it over. Do you have a pen? I handed her one. She wrote something quickly, then folded the postcard once and handed it to me. Don't read it until after I leave. I looked at her. Deal. She smiled. I almost forgot. What? She reached into the pocket of her jacket, pulled out the Seattle postcard I'd watched her buy for me. I figured. You should have one too. I laughed. So now we both have postcards. I guess we do. For one quiet second, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped closer, wrapped her arms around me. Not for long, just long enough to make the airport disappear. When she stepped back, her eyes were shining. I'm really glad you missed your flight. I smiled. So am I. She hesitated. Call me? I will. I mean it. So do I. She nodded once, then turned, walked toward the arrival's exit. Halfway there, she looked back. I was still standing exactly where she'd left me. She smiled one last time, then disappeared into the crowd. I looked down at the postcard in my hand. Slowly, I unfolded it. On the back, beneath the picture of the Boston skyline, she'd written only one sentence. Some delays turn out to be exactly where life was waiting for you. I stood there smiling like an idiot in the middle of Logan International Airport. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. I already knew who it was. Did you read it too early? I laughed. Typed back. You underestimated my self-control. 3 dots appeared. Then another message. Good. Dinner tomorrow? I looked toward the exit she'd walked through only moments before. Then back at my phone. I thought you had to spend time with your family. Her reply came almost instantly. I do. Tomorrow evening. I don't want today to be the end of our story. I smiled. Neither did I. Tomorrow evening sounds perfect. 1 year later, I found myself sitting in another airport. This time, Lily was beside me. She rested her head lightly on my shoulder while reading a novel she'd bought 5 minutes earlier. I looked over at her. You know. What? We almost never would have met. She smiled without looking up. I know. If you'd made your flight, you would have walked right past me. If you'd made yours, I would have walked right past you. She reached for my hand, laced her fingers through mine, then looked up with the same warm smile she'd given me the first day we met. So, think we should miss this one too? I laughed. Not this time. Why not? Because wherever we're going, we're already going there together. She kissed my cheek. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. We stood, picked up our bags, and walked toward the gate side by side, not as strangers who had missed a flight, but as two people who had found exactly what they never knew they were looking for. What would you have done if missing your flight led you to the person who changed your life? Have you ever experienced a chance encounter that changed everything? Tell me your story in the comments.